Good afternoon and happy President's Day. We have these beautiful flowers because there was a naturalization ceremony earlier today. How wonderful to share that space with them. Yes. Also, I know it's chilly and we're trying to do something to get it warmer in here. If that doesn't happen, just put your coat around you. And I'm sorry, it's kind of chilly. Welcome to members in the auditorium, and a very special welcome to our members viewing online. Following today's program, please join us in the Halsey Hall to meet our speakers. Please take your phones out and silence them. Our Special Events Committee members have planned some good times to share together as we gather in small groups. We have a book discussion with Lindy Walker on February 25th from noon to 1:30. Please note that registration is nearly full. We have a tour of Richmond's Roman Catholic Cathedral of the Sacred Heart on February 26th at 10 a.m. This is the rescheduled from the original date of February 18th, and there are only a few spots left. Update your calendar if you signed up for the tour of Monumental Church. It is rescheduled for March 4th, and registration is closed for this special event. You may sign up on the program tab of your members portal at twcrichmond.org, or you may visit the Women's Club table at the reception for assistance in registering for any of our upcoming special events. Thank you to this Finance Committee for providing our refreshments today, and thank you to Frazier Armstrong for serving as chair of the day. Frazier will now introduce our speakers.
Good afternoon. Glad to see everybody here today. And it is absolutely my pleasure to introduce two of my favorite people to you today, Matt Williams and Kelly O'Keefe. I've known them both a long time and in several iterations of our professional lives. I've even had the pleasure of working with them on several projects at Brand Federation. Kelly O'Keefe is managing partner and CEO of Brand Federation, where he leads consultancy advising for organizations across Virginia and around the world. Before launching the firm, Kelly served as managing director, professor, and founding board member of VCU Brand Center, widely recognized as the nation's premier graduate program in advertising and branding. Over his career, Kelly has guided brand strategy for iconic organizations, including Disney, Microsoft, GE, Harvard, Mayo Clinic, the Kennedy Foundation, Sesame Street, and Capital One. He has also advised 5 Virginia governors on branding and communications. His insights have been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, and he's a contributing author of Beyond Advertising. Kelly has been inducted into the Virginia Communications Hall of Fame and named Ernst & Young's Virginia Entrepreneur of the Year. Kelly eats, sleeps, and breathes creativity, whether it is an art project, a community initiative, a family occasion, a client project, or just a different way of looking at a challenge. He looks at the world through a prism of possibility and opportunity. His strong principles guide his decisions and inspire others to do what's right, not always easy, but right. He mobilizes talented and dedicated people and brings out the best in him, of his colleagues and his coworkers. He describes himself as an optimist. His gift, according to him, and it's true, is seeing past the obstacles to the potential we all have to make a difference. His superpower is to help people seize that potential. When he's not officially working, Kelly is contributing his time to serving on several boards, traveling with his wife, Christy, enjoying and creating art with his very large family, and tirelessly encouraging others to be and do their very best. Joining him is Matt Williams, managing partner and president of Brand Federation. Prior to joining in 2019, Matt served as CEO of the Martin Agency, where he helped grow the firm into one of the 25 largest agencies in the United States. During his tenure, he led brand strategy for powerhouse brands, including Geico, Oreo, UPS, Discover, and Walmart. Under Matt's leadership, Martin was named One Show Creative Agency of the Year and recognized 4 times on Ad Age's Creative Innovators list. Matt has also served as a visiting clinical professor and curriculum innovation fellow at the College of William & Mary and is a contributing author to Kellogg on branding. He holds a marketing degree from William & Mary and an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. Matt describes his superpower as component thinking, breaking complex situations apart, finding how they interact, and putting them into words. Having worked with Matt, I can attest to his uncanny ability to join a project midstream, grasp the gist of just the right things, and distill them into the perfect brand statement in a matter of minutes. When Matt is not working, he's playing the bass guitar for his band, Acoustic Underground. He also loves creative cultures, strategic brand ideas, Fender guitars, IPAs, and bikes, and spending time with his wife, who he says is the most awesome person ever. Together, these two have built a life portfolio of exceptional service and exceptional work. They share a unique distinction, leading the only 2 Virginia agencies ever named Adweek Agency of the Year. We are indeed for a treat today. Thank you.
Thank you. My goodness, it was worth coming here just for the introduction.
We got all that on tape, right?
Yeah. So we're here today, and we're gonna flip over to the other presentation, and I want to talk a little bit about branding today. But before I do, I'm honored to be here, and I was thinking about coming to the Women's Club. I know a bit about your history, and I also know a bit about how your history and the history of the leaders of this organization have intersected Richmond's history. I am particularly interested in the fact that early leaders of the Women's Club were involved in the suffrage movement at a time when women were not allowed to vote here in Virginia or in the United States. And they went to work to change that, along with others. And I just have to reflect on the fact that just about a month ago today, I had the honor of standing and seeing our first woman governor be inaugurated. And I also had the honor, just in case some of you weren't cheering for her, I had the honor of being in a state where it didn't matter what the outcome of the election was, we were going to have our first woman governor. And it's because of folks like the folks who are assembled here today, because it takes leadership to get change. And we'll talk somewhat about that as we talk about branding. I also want to just give you a tiny introduction of our company, Brand Federation. It's not a sales message, but just to put context to what we're going to talk about in terms of branding. We're fortunate to be able to work all around the world. Some of our recent clients, Joe and the Juice, we're working with right now in Copenhagen. My first trip to Copenhagen was to go out and work with them this fall. We work with Colonial Williamsburg, and Matt will talk a little bit more about that. We're launching a new line of electric vehicles in India, in Mumbai, for JSW Motors. So the reason that car is cropped on the bottom is because it shows the name of the car on that photo, and I can't show you that yet. This is myself, our third partner, Ryan Chandler-Dovis, and our client Mercy Corps out in Colombia. And keep an eye in March, and you'll see a significant rebranding announcement for Mercy Corps, which is an organization that helps people worldwide with relief issues and sustainability issues. We work with Tecnológico de Monterrey. It took me a long time to say that, even close to right. My client laughed at me many, many times saying it wrong, which is one of the major universities in Latin America. And we work here with Dominion Energy and with lots of Fortune 500 companies around the world. What I'm even more excited about is that over the years, we've been able to touch brands right here in our backyard in Virginia of all shapes and sizes. And Matt and I work to try and capture them all, and I'm pretty sure we're missing some, but we really tried hard because I kept thinking, yeah, but what if somebody in the audience was our client and we didn't put them on the list? So I'm going to go off of this quickly just so you don't see any omissions that are on here. But we've been fortunate to be able to influence many brands in this community. And so when we talk about influencing brands, let's start right out by defining what we mean by branding. And Matt, I'll let you.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everybody. When people hear the word brand, they often think of name and logo, and they're not wrong, but that is, as we might say, necessary but insufficient in a way to think about branding. What we think about when we think about brands is the set of images and associations that you might attach to the name of an organization or a logo that you might see. Sometimes when people step back and they start talking about what brands is, they start talking about promises, and they say things like, a brand is a promise that you can bring to life through creativity and advertising. If you think about advertising, it's always, a creative way to make a promise to you about what you can expect from your interactions with an organization. Unfortunately, we don't think that's quite the right definition either. We'd like to actually step further back and start thinking of a brand not really as a promise, but as a probability. And the probability relates to the calculus that you go through in your mind that is built up, torn down, or left unchanged by every encounter. So if you think about the Women's Club, there are a set of expectations that you have related to that brand, and that is those expectations may relate to the way you interact with the members of the club. Maybe the Bowling Haxel House has a big part in that brand. Those expectations are either exceeded, met, or unfortunately not met, and all the cumulative effect of those expectations in your minds becomes the brand of the Women's Club. It's no different for a Fortune 100 company. So if you think about a brand, I want you to think broadly and think about a reputation and a set of images that you connect with an organization. So, well, that's the wrong way. So, when we boil it down, your brand really isn't about the promises you make. We want you to think about your brand as the promises you keep. Promises you make are the promises that you see on advertising. Promises you keep are the promises that are made with every interaction you have with the brands that you interact with. And when we think about brand strategy is simply the ability to step back and say, what promises should this organization make based on promises we know it can keep?
So let's talk about how great brands are built and how every great brand is built. It never starts with the message. It starts with a set of convictions that drive an organization. And when you're working on branding, if there's one thing that you need to get right, it is what are those core convictions that drive the organization that inform both what they aspire to accomplish and what they're actually capable of doing and doing well. And often those convictions last for years, sometimes decades. So when I work with Disney, for example, their core convictions really formed by Walt Disney and Roy Disney are so simple, just to create magical experiences for children and families. And if you think about creating magical entertainment for children and families, you don't need much to say that that's an important purpose, right? We are inspired by those things. But in the world of Disney, that idea launched decades ago by a handful of people on a day-to-day basis is reinterpreted through an internal culture of thousands of people. And those thousands of people are making movies and TV shows, they're making amusement parks and theme rides, they're doing cruise ships and new media. And yet, if they're doing it right, everything that they're doing internally, inside the organization, is designed to create magical experiences for children and families. And if you're doing that, you already have a strong brand. But then the next part is the most important part for all brands, which is delivering that in terms of an experience. And now if we go back to Disney, there are millions of people on a day-to-day basis who experience Disney directly. If Disney's doing its job right as it relates to its brand, those people are experiencing magical entertainment, right? They're saying this is incredible. This is where the promises that are made in advertising are kept, with the experience that you have. But the final part can make your brand even stronger. Advertising is an important part of branding. Communications is an important part of branding, but only when those communications, the things that you say, in the case of Disney, to tens of millions of people to attract them, are making promises that the experience that they have with you can keep. So when you think about brands, I want you to think about, it's fine to make inspiring promises with your messaging, but only if you can keep those inspiring promises by making sure that you're delivering a consistent experience, that you built an internal culture that is driven to deliver on your conviction. And if you do that well, it's a great brand every time. So we're going to talk about some organizations that do that exceptionally well, just to give you an idea. But before we do, we're going to talk about some organizations that don't do it so well. Because that's always more fun. So just a little bit about why brands fail. And there are four things that are common across almost every brand failure. The first is lack of conviction, loss of focus, putting sizzle over substance, and making promises that you can't keep. All right, let's start with the first, lack of conviction.
So, Boeing's been in the news a lot. You might recognize this, but if you go on the Boeing website, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see an organization that says their values are safety and quality and trust, right? These are values that you can't argue with that. If you're going to build airplanes, I hope you're safe, and I hope I can trust you, right? Good for Boeing. Or not. NTSB faults Boeing for lack of safety protocols. Boeing lost trust of Americans. The values don't mean anything if they don't happen in the real world. In fact, the best way to tear down a great brand is to say you stand for this and then behave in a way that is that. So Boeing can do all the best ads in the world. It doesn't matter when this is what you find relative to what you see on their website. That's how you lose trust, and that's how you destroy a great brand.
All right, let's see if I can top that.
Oh, you can.
Loss of focus. So, a great brand is focused on certain things. Disney is focused on magical entertainment for children and families. And when you keep focus, you can have a strong brand. But let's go back to a brand that maybe isn't doing so well right now. It's interesting. I typed this in last night to ChatGPT, is Sears dead? And its response, no, Sears is not completely dead. Is something I hope I never hear somebody referring to me. Well, I think he's still alive.
Somewhere the chief marketing officer of Sears is twitching right now.
So let's put this in context. Sears was the world's largest retailer. It was one of the 10 largest companies on earth. They were headquartered in the world's tallest building. That's not particularly relevant, but it kind of goes with the theme. They had over 350,000 employees, 3,500 stores, and 2/3 of all America shopped at Sears. As a matter of fact, half of all adults in America had a Sears credit card. How do you blow that? This guy, CEO of Sears, said that Sears Empire could not retain its position above all other companies by relying solely on its existing business. noteworthy, the quote came from 7 decades of self-destruction, which is
That's another thing you don't want said about you.
no. So what did they do when they thought that focusing on providing goods and services to America was not enough? They went on a buying spree that included buying Land's End, Discover Card, Craftsman, The Great Outdoors, Die Hard, Dean Witter, Reynolds, Caldwell Banker, Allstate Insurance Company. They launched Prodigy, one of the first online services. They had a savings bank. They had a maid service. They sold military equipment and arms. There was almost no business that they didn't go into. And you would think that if you started this as one of the largest companies in America, that this would make you bigger. It didn't do that. It distracted them from their core business. And we saw a complete destruction of value over a short period of time. This is number of stores going from 3,600. That in 1920 or 2020, they were 182 stores. And I checked, this is as of last night, there are 5 Sears stores and 3 Kmart stores, which they also own. To put that in perspective, there are more Stella's stores in Richmond than the worldwide footprint of Sears and Kmart put together. And so contrast that with a company like Walmart, which has stayed focused within the same category for all of its history, and now is at, what, 400 billion? Brad, you should know that. Brad Armstrong, here another marketer. $400 billion in sales and growing. So Matt, let's see if you can top that.
Yeah, Kelly gave me the sizzle over substance section, which I don't, we'll talk about that later, I guess. So we found this quote from Mercer Management Consulting that does a really nice job of distinguishing branding from advertising. The corporate brand is one of the largest, the great under-leveraged business assets. Organizations have failed to build strong brands because they've focused investments primarily on advertising and not on aligning value propositions and business processes with the promise. They get what's happening in those circle slides, right? They get that you can't focus on the promise until you can focus on the promises you can keep. And that disconnect is what destroys brand value. So Mercer got it right. This is our audience participation section of today. Who knows the slogan for something on this list?
These are the most valuable companies in America, the
10
top
most
10.
valuable companies in America based on market capitalization.
So these are big brands.
Yeah.
Just don't all shout at once.
I can't believe you don't know the tagline for Broadcom. What's it? Where did that come from? The Martin Agency wrote that line,
Yeah.
by the way. Didn't we, Brad?
Yeah. We did have a ringer. We have a ringer in the audience, Kristen Cavallo,
Yeah, Kristen and Brad are not allowed to answer this question.
who helped grow the Martin Agency to even new heights. And Kristen now is doing amazing things at the Branch Museum. And I knew you'd know that one.
The point is, advertising is not brand, right? So, anyway, that disconnect is a big problem. So let's go forward. Remember this? This was a Super Bowl ad from 2 years ago for a company called FTX. Does anybody know who FTX is? They spent billions of dollars to hire Larry David and buy the media that they spent on the Super Bowl. FTX is Sam Bankman-Fried's company. Sam Bankman-Fried was a crypto guy who is now cooling his heels in prison, right? The ads were awesome. The company and the brand, not so much. One doesn't necessarily lead to the other.
So again, not an indictment of advertising, but advertising when it is making a promise that can't be kept doesn't work, which takes us to our last reason why brands fail: false promises. And this is just, it's epidemic right now. So let's talk about Enron. I found Enron's code of ethics.
It wasn't easy to find.
I'm not sure anyone in their leadership team ever read it, but I did. Enron aims to conduct business with honesty, fairness, and the highest moral standards. Volkswagen. On their ethics, honesty, we do the right thing out of inner conviction, even if no one is watching, except that everybody was watching, when they faked their emissions on their cars, which not only got the CEO fired, but there are several members of their leadership team who are still in prison because of that. And then we have closer to home Wells Fargo. You find their promise was we strive to be recognized by our stakeholders as setting the standard among the world's great companies for integrity and principled performance. Now, I don't know if their CEO wrote that. I do know that their CEO was barred from banking forever, the entire industry, not just fired, because they were cheating their customers. And here's an interesting thing. I spoke with the New York Times when that happened about them cheating their customers. And I didn't know until almost a year and a half later when I got a check in the mail for a little over $1,000 that I had been a victim of that scandal because I was a Wells Fargo customer. Never occurred to me that it had happened to me, but in fact, they had charged me stuff that they shouldn't have charged me. Now, this is a good one. I love this because this group called State Street Advisors created a brilliant brand expression by building the Fearless Gal sculpture, which was put in front of the bull on Wall Street. And this was really recognized as a great take by putting Fearless Girl in front of the bull on Wall Street's bad habits as it related to not treating women in Wall Street as equals. So there isn't anything I could say against that except for one thing. These are all actual headlines. State Street Advisors was paying their women, their own employees, less than their male employees when they put that statue up. So much so that they were successfully sued and filed a settlement to pay their female employees more. So when you say one thing and you do another thing, people don't listen to what they say, they watch what you do. And that's why brands can no longer be built just based on message. In fact, this is happening at a record pace. We've seen it recently with Starbucks. We've seen it with Target, Bud Light, Cracker Barrel. This is a very sad video of them taking down the new sign and putting the old sign back up. They actually made this video. I don't know why they made it. It's the saddest thing I've ever seen. Forever 21 and more.
So here's the point of this. That, the stories they can be kind of funny in retrospect, but they're actually not funny because the erosion of trust that comes when brands are mismanaged like that and when promises are made that are not kept like that actually impacts the way we interact. So we talk a lot about brands affecting culture, and we're proud of our ability to do that. That's our superpower, to use Frazier's words. But when brands behave in the way that Kelly just went through, those examples, it actually negatively affects culture in really meaningful ways. So what it does is erode trust. And if you think about the erosion of trust from the top to the bottom, this is a study that measures the trust of countries, right? The National Institutions Index does the percentage of people, as measured by Gallup, who believe that these countries are trustworthy. The United States is ranked 7th. 49% of the people surveyed thinks the United States is a trustworthy country. Less than half. This is a problem. By the end of this speech, we're going to have new numbers. I don't think they're going up, but that's a different speech. Okay, so that's the highest level. Let's go down a little bit into the business world. These are the levels of people who believe that these different categories of organizations can be trusted a great deal, quite a lot, from 21 to 22. Small business, highest on the list. Still going down a little bit, 68%, but we trust small business people. Let's flip it over and look at big business. 14%. Remember the time when businesses would tell you, we're big, we've got this many employees, and we have this many locations, and we've been in business for this many years, and they use that as a sign of trust? Forget it. It's over. We trust Stella's now. They're small. They're part of the community. We know them because we don't trust the big people, because the big companies haven't behaved in a way to engender that trust. They haven't earned it. In fact, they've earned their bottom place down here. So we've seen the US go down. We've seen companies go down. What about people or disciplines?
You know, it occurs to me, Matt, the good news here for Sears is that they are now a small business.
Wow. I don't know how to respond to that. That wasn't in the rehearsal. Okay. What about professions? Advertising practitioners. The good news here is that we are more trustworthy than car salespeople, senators, and congresspeople. You know what? We deserve it. Look what we've done. We've gone out on behalf of these companies and made all these big grand promises and produced all these big fancy ads and said you can trust us and we're amazing. And then you look at the behavior of those companies for whom we've made those promises, and they've fallen short over and over and over again. And this is actually a really important takeaway for all of us to have as we think about brands. If we think about the promises we can keep and making those promises in a way that isn't spin and it's not manipulation, we're not spin doctors. Where'd he go? We're not spin doctors. We're people who tell the truth. Our job is to uncover the truth that needs to be told about organizations and tell that truth in a way that is compelling and authentic to those organizations. And if we do that the right way, we'll find ways to clear out the noise that sometimes obscures the messages and the truth of those brands and tell it in a way that's both compelling to you as a consumer, but honest and true to those organizations themselves. That's when we win. When we're lazy and we do it the way we've been doing it, that's when brands lose. That's when we lose. And we've lost way too often. This is our fault.
And it has a cost for all of us because we all have to communicate about organizations, about ideas. We have to be trusted. And if you talk to the youngest person in your family, you'll find that they don't trust what we say these days. And therefore, we have to demonstrate through other means. But fortunately, there are ways to do that. So let's talk about why brands succeed. I want to start with a brand that has succeeded wildly, Apple. The things that drive success in a brand tend to be clarifying focus, right? We know what we stand for, and we do this really well. If you do that, you can then simplify the operations of the organization. Think about Sears and how complex that organization is. Even here, we have a company that's gone now. It was the largest consumer electronics retailer in the world, Circuit City. It was a good company, started to lose its way. It launched CarMax, another company. It launched Divx, another company. And even though CarMax is doing well now and they're good people running that business, that distraction hurt Circuit City's ability to respond to changing market conditions. And so Circuit City isn't here anymore. So simplifying those operations so that you can focus on them, unifying your internal culture. Every great organization has a culture of people that feel like they're moving in the same direction. Fortifying loyalty, the loyalty of those customers. You know, I already know, and I know I'm an ad person, I shouldn't be this loyal, but I already know what my next phone will be. It'll be another iPhone because I just am loyal to the brand Apple. That's a good thing. Sometimes we'll have a client who we're in the process of changing a brand for, and they'll say, I can't believe my customers are so stuck on our old name. And I always say, you should be thrilled. They're loyal to your brand. Yes, we have some changes to make, but they're loyal to you. That's what we're looking for. And finally, you can amplify your voice. So let's talk about Apple. I'm older, so I know this. Apple was a company that was almost bankrupt in 1987. They had sales of $4 billion. They were in a steep decline. They had gone through 3 or 4 CEOs in the prior years. There was a cover article in Wired magazine that invited experts within the computer industry to comment on whether Apple would survive. And most of them said no. And one of them, interestingly, Michael Dell, said, no, Apple is already dead. They just don't know it. Sounds a little like Sears. And they made a very desperate attempt to bring life back into the brand by hiring back the CEO that they had fired, Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs returned to the company, and the first thing he did was not to lay off a bunch of people or change the way that they produced their product. The first thing he did was to tell people in the company why they should care about Apple again. And he did so by producing this book, which only went to employees of Apple. Nobody else got it. Fortunately, one of those employees sold it on eBay. So I got it, and what he said about brands is incredible. The most admired companies in the world have one thing in common. They stand for something. The world can change, the market can change, their products can change, but their core beliefs remain the same. Like Disney, Sony, and Nike, Apple is a brand that is loved and respected around the world. We like to think it's because we have a soul. We believe that people with a passion can change the world for the better, and we believe that creativity is the force that pushes the human race forward. Now, that's an interesting conviction, the idea that you can actually produce products that empower creativity, and if you do so, those creative people who use them will push the human race forward. And it was enough of a belief system that employees at Apple started to believe again. And Apple's success, well, if you had invested $1,000 in Apple the moment that book was published, you would now have $1,343,000 in return. And it hasn't stopped. Apple's last quarter was the most profitable quarter ever. There is incredible power if you can refocus on the core convictions that drove an organization and build actual products and services that deliver experiences around that. And then great advertising just makes it greater. So let's have another example that's closer to home.
Yeah, we had the privilege of working with Colonial Williamsburg on their brand over a period of about 3 years. And we've all been to CW, right? We've all been to CW. I'm not sure how recent your visit has been to Colonial Williamsburg, but the quote that's on the screen here, that the future may learn from the past, is the vision statement that the founder of Colonial Williamsburg penned, and is still the vision statement for that brand and for that experience. Unfortunately, what had happened over the years was that they realized that the stories they were telling about the founding of America were incomplete. And those stories of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, they're great, but they weren't the full story of everything that happened in this remarkable place of Colonial Williamsburg. They weren't the story of the indigenous people and the enslaved people who were there. They weren't the story of the blacksmith and of the people who lived in this community and the contributions they made to the founding of America. So we were brought in by Cliff Fleet, who's the CEO of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, to help him figure out how to tell this more authentic story of Colonial Williamsburg. So let's go back to the theme that we talked about a minute ago, which is how do we uncover the truth of this brand? The truth of this brand is that there's never been a more important time for us to learn from the past about how we engage with each other and how we activate our citizenship of America. We have to do that. And Colonial Williamsburg is doing it in remarkable ways, but people didn't realize that. And it was our job to understand, how can we tell this story a little more effectively? So we did a bunch of research, which is what we do. And one of the interviews that we did with a historian said something very interesting. The most important thing about the past is telling the truth about it. Inclusion is not about political correctness or being woke. It's about empowering the mission by telling the truth. They were only telling parts of the truth, and they realized that the rest of the truth had to be told, and there's nobody better to tell it than the people who operate this place where it all happened. So we went out, we did a bunch of research, and we talked to people around the country about what they think about Colonial Williamsburg. But first we said, what do you want from your interactions with American history? How do you want to feel? 83% said they want to feel curious. 80% said they want to feel inspired. If you think about what Colonial Williamsburg was 20 years ago, it was that place that you dragged your screaming kid down Duke of Gloucester Street because they were bored to death, and then you took them to the wig maker, and you took them to the hat maker, and then they finally got to go to Busch Gardens, right? Curiosity, inspiration. The stories that live in Colonial Williamsburg are incredibly inspiring and spark curiosity. We just need to be able to tell them better and have people understand how they work. So when we look at the respondents from this research and we divide them into people who've been to Colonial Williamsburg in the last 3 years and the people who haven't, we ask them whether they delivered on the experience they want from history. And the gap is very short with people who visited in the last 5 years. 83% versus 79, 80% versus 73. This says they're actually doing a pretty good job with this. And the people who've experienced it in the last 5 years give them credit for it. There's the story. Look at the gap when you look at people who visited longer ago than 5 years, right? 80% versus 55, right? 83 versus 71. The gaps are huge. This says the truth of this brand is buried, and we need to uncover it. Right? So that's what we did. All this research led us to a place where we realized that the desire for curiosity and inspiration as it relates to American history has never been stronger, because we're coming into the 250th anniversary of the nation. People are talking about this. They're thinking about it. We've got elections. We've got political engagement that is, granted, polarizing, but engaged. Colonial Williamsburg should be at the center of these conversations, and they weren't, right? No other place can satisfy this desire for curiosity and inspiration like Colonial Williamsburg can, because nobody delivers the experience of history the way Colonial Williamsburg does. It's not that place you drag your kid down Dog Street, right? It's a place where you can engage in stories that you've never heard about the founding of this nation that will make you a better American. How do we tell that story? Well, we tell that story through a mechanism that we call the manifesto. And what we do is take all this research and all these interviews that we do, uncover that story, and figure out how to tell it in a way that can change the way people think about how they engage with this brand. So this is the manifesto that came out of our work from Colonial Williamsburg. Our lives are made up of hundreds of stories. But of those hundreds, there are a precious few that define us, the ones that are the most uniquely layered, deeply inspiring, and endlessly fascinating. One of those is the story of America's founding, a story of passion and courage, vision and genius, of struggle and determination. And no one brings it to life like Colonial Williamsburg. There are some important things. I'll pause. There are some important things going on in this manifesto already. We're establishing the fact that we're telling stories about the founding of America. We're establishing that these stories are interesting. But we haven't established yet that these stories are broader and more interesting than you thought. And if you're one of those people who said, yeah, I went there 10 years ago, my parents dragged me there, and I don't need to go back because this place has never changed, now is our chance to change your mind. Here you'll experience the full breadth of this unique moment in human history and encounter the stories of an entire community in all their complexity and contradictions. You'll come face to face with the brilliance of our founders, check, and the ideas that formed the foundations of our independence. Marvel at the ingenuity of traditional artisans and be inspired by the perseverance and enduring hope of enslaved and indigenous people. You'll walk in the streets, stand in the rooms, and be surrounded by the authentic sights, sounds, and sensations of revolutionary America, down to the smallest detail. And you'll see how our experts are making new discoveries and expanding our knowledge of the American story every day. This place changes all the time, because our understanding of the stories that took place in this place changes all the time. As we continue our journey toward a more perfect union, the stories of the people and ideas that built our nation don't just matter to our past, they matter to our future. This is not the place you stop off on the way to Busch Gardens. This is a place that can help you engage more constructively as an American. Join us as the stories of America unfold every day. They're changing all the time in Colonial Williamsburg. We're trying to re-energize this brand by telling the truth of what they do there. It's complicated, and it's messy, and it's fascinating, and it changes all the time. So this is the brag slide. Kelly made me put this in. When we presented that manifesto, one of the members of the board asked one question. He said, I only have one question. Who wrote these beautiful words? And that was Neil Gorsuch, which was pretty cool. I wrote them. You'd think you'd jump into advertising. Oh, I know what to make the ads about. In fact, maybe I just saw an ad. You didn't. What you saw was a catalyst for re-engaging not only the people who we want to visit Colonial Williamsburg, but the people who work at Colonial Williamsburg. This is the work session that came immediately on the heels of the strategy that we wrote, where the leadership of Williamsburg are the 5 people in the back of the room standing at the flip charts. Those are all vice presidents and senior vice presidents of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And everybody who was in that room were the management and leaders of the organization, where we were talking about how do we make this promise real? How do we make sure the thing that we believe about this brand is a promise we can keep? And what do we need to change before one thing goes out into the world? This internal conversation has to happen. And it worked really well. They've changed. They've done such great work. If you haven't been to CW recently, you should go. They've done such amazing work under the leadership of Cliff, who many of you probably know. He's done a fabulous job. And it was picked up in this article in the New York Times, which was about building a better Colonial Williamsburg. Virginia's reconstructed colonial capital, long criticized as presenting an idealized image of the American Revolution, brings its history into the 21st century. It's really remarkable. It's a great example of a brand close to home that did the hard work of understanding what's true about it and worked to clear the noise away from that truth and tell it in the most compelling way they could.
So I'll end with just a few closing thoughts. What I loved about Matt's story of Colonial Williamsburg is it was all about understanding what promises we could actually keep and then making those promises as compelling as possible. If you do those two things, you'll be building a good brand. So what we'd love for you to walk away with is to understand that great brands stand up, they stand out, and they stand for something. That they're confident and they inspire confidence in the rest of us because of that confidence. That they're not without flaws, but they're honest about their aspirations. We're not expecting brands to be without flaws. How many of you, raise your hand if you thought U-Crops was a great brand? Yes, amazing brand. All right, raise your hand if you think they had really low prices. It's okay for a brand not to be good at everything. It's okay for a brand to be honest about its flaws and to be focused on those things that it can be the best at. And finally, they understand that the financial impact that they generate is the reward for the human impact that they generate. So if you do those things, you'll be building a great brand. And with that, we'd love to answer any questions that you may have.
There's one right here.
How do you all use AI?
How do we use AI? What a good question. AI is like it's the cloud that hangs over every decision that we make. So we were just talking about this in the green room. In the context of something else.
By the way, every talk we ever give, and we have a program called Beer and Brands, which is a podcast, emerges from us sitting around talking about stuff like this, which is really sad. You would think we would be talking about something that wasn't brand related, but no, we're sitting with a beer in our hands talking about brands.
We thought we should put a camera on this, so we did. How do we use AI? To us, the most important distinction between AI is inputs and outputs, meaning AI does an amazing job of scouring the world for information as input into something you're creating. And where AI gets in trouble is if we blur the line between input and output. If we use AI as the output of our product, as our product itself, we're not doing our jobs. AI can be an incredibly efficient gatherer of information, of inputs, but it cannot create output, or we can't let it create output. Maybe it can. We don't want it to. So that distinction between input and output is the most important thing for us. When it comes to AI, we do use it, but we only use it to help with input.
Yes.
Could you speak a little bit about how the leader, I'll say just the leader, impacts an organization or a company or the United States for good, for better, for worse, or and how you address it or deal with it? I mean, a company.
It's a great question.
It's the most important person as it relates to brand is always the CEO. We do not work with clients if we don't have direct interaction with the CEO. And that sounds arrogant. It's not intended to be arrogant. It's just that if you believe that branding is changing the communications of an organization, you might be okay with the VP of marketing. If you believe that branding is changing or refining or aligning the experiences they deliver, strengthening the internal culture, reviewing and improving upon the mission and the values, well, then you're going to need to be talking to the C-suite, including the CEO. So, for example, I mentioned Dominion Energy. We wrote their mission statement and worked with Bob Blue and his team to do that. We worked on their values. We worked on their messaging. And we also worked on the kind of promises from a customer service point of view that they're making to their customers to deliver improved customer service, because even in a monopoly in the energy world, they can do a better job of delivering better experiences. And so the CEO is critically important, and in many cases, when you see a company that's a mess, they're disorganized, they're trying to pursue too many things, you're asking, why is he going off and buying another thing when we haven't fixed the one we have? It's often because the CEO isn't focused. And so they're a critical component to any organization.
Either not focused, or even worse, that their words or their behavior don't match the promise people associate with that brand. It's true of organizations, it's true of companies, it can be true of countries.
And that leads me to my question. I was curious what your thoughts are in respect to brand, not politics, to the Trump brand. Because he's branded a long time. So what are his brands?
I'm trying to find the questioner. Where are you? Oh, there she is. Okay.
Oh, great.
Kelly and I are going to do rock, paper, scissors to see who
Yeah, really.
starts. Ready?
They asked us not to talk about politics, so thank you for that question. No, I hear you.
Okay. Well, so let's talk about the definition of a brand, right? The set of images and associations that you connect with a person or an organization or a company, whatever it is. What images and associations do you connect with Donald Trump? You don't have to answer that, but that's gold. Yeah.
He does like
and
gold.
importantly, to me, the corollary to that question is, do those images and associations comport or contradict the images and associations you have or want to have with the organization that person represents? And the dissonance between those two things can be that's the problem, right? That's the problem. And if those two things don't measure up, they aren't connected, they aren't consonant, they don't sing together, it leads to the problem of promises made versus promises kept. And that's a political slogan. I don't mean it that way. I mean, if somebody expects a certain thing from America and gets a certain other thing from the leader of America, it confuses the heck out of everybody, right? And that kind of dissonance is death to a brand. Whether you agree with one side or the other, that dissonance will never be good for this country.
Yeah, I think you could look at it as simply as this. The alignment between the political sphere and what we've talked about is that we have seen the disassociation of what brands, including political brands, say and what brands do. That's eroded trust in drastic ways. And it's not just in politics. It's in religion, it's in medicine, it's in other areas. It's at a point of crisis because, unfortunately or fortunately, we have things we have to talk about. One of our clients is Harvard Medical School. When they publish a paper that says, here is a medical condition and a solution for it that you should know about it, they now publish it knowing, because we've done the research, that a majority of those listening don't believe that this is the right answer. Now, if it's your job to help cure people and make them better by providing information that will point them in the right direction medically, and we don't believe what they're saying, we have a problem. So it is an epidemic problem. It's a problem in politics and elsewhere. Yes?
What is your take on a lot of foreign countries buying up American brands and what that will do to the value of the companies and how it will affect us economically?
Wow, what an interesting question.
Matt, why don't you answer? Yeah, the question
Yes.
was, what is our take on foreign countries acquiring U.S. brands and what that might mean for the brands and for the country.
I'll go back to the principle that underlined the answer that my thoughts were on the Trump question. And it's the question of, does the acquisition of those companies somehow contradict or belie the promise that those companies are making to the American consumer? If it does, it's a problem. If it doesn't, it may create other problems, policy problems, economic problems, but it may not create a brand problem, right? Brand problems are all rooted in a disconnect between the promises you make and the behavior you display in the world. If foreign ownership causes those companies to behave in a way that's contrary to the expectations they've spent years creating, it's going to be a problem for that brand.
So if the public doesn't know that the companies that we have valued have been bought out, and they keep their brand, but they're owned by a different group of people that might not have the same values, as long as the company keeps the same brand and feeling and to us,
Right.
then it won't matter whether they're bought out by.
It may matter in other ways. It may matter in other ways. Do you have Smithfield in your freezers? What's that? Yeah. If you have Smithfield in your freezers, you're paying a Chinese company, right? Does the Smithfield brand suffer from that? That's a question for you all to answer, not for me to answer. But I'm not sure that Chinese ownership made Smithfield behave in a way that was contrary to your expectations from the Smithfield brand, which means many of you may still buy it. It may bring a host of other issues, but from a branding standpoint, it may not cause a problem.
But behind that question is an issue, which is that if you are counting on your brand being successful because people don't actually know about it,
Right.
if you're hoping to keep things secret about your brand so that people will not dislike you, well, that's a losing strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
We live in a world awash with information. As a matter of fact, we saw this a few years back when Dove had a Real Beauty campaign, amazing work with their Real Beauty campaign, celebrating the fact that women come in all shapes, sizes, and forms, and they are all beautiful and have the right to believe themselves to be beautiful. They actually funded, they didn't just put that in actions, the words, they put actions behind it, funding the Dove Self-Esteem Fund, which gave money to schools to help build programs to give self-esteem to girls, to remind them that they are beautiful from birth. And all of that was fantastic until this thing called the internet pointed out that Unilever, who made those ads, also made Axe body spray and about 20 other brands that were communicating in more problematic ways about beauty for women, and actually undermining self-esteem with premises like, if you spray Axe body spray on yourself, then women will flock to you in droves. Now,
I can
I
vouch for
don't
the
know if
fact
you
that
have
that
a-
doesn't work.
I have 4 sons who were teenagers. They went through that. Totally did not work for them. They're good guys. It didn't work for them. But now I will say that controversy came out, and Unilever made some better decisions about how to advertise across its other brands. So in this case, the work that was done on behalf of Dove Real Beauty influenced the trajectory of that company once they kind of got in trouble for speaking out of both sides of their mouth. So we can't count on you on deceiving the customer into loving our brand. We actually have to make it lovable.
Yeah, and it all goes back to that disconnect between promises made versus promises kept. If you're hoping nobody knows you're not keeping your promises, you're in trouble.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
I had the talking stick, sorry.
why don't we do this first? And that second, you both have microphones, so I'm so confused.
When clients call you and have an issue with their branding, what leads to major changes, whether that, how do you communicate the changes that you make? Is it something as dramatic as a name change? Or is it like the advertising that you were describing for Dove? Or is it something else? How does that work?
I guess it really depends. I mean, we have changed many brand names, but only when there's a compelling reason to do so. As a matter of fact, here in Virginia, we have a great organization called Shine Forth that we renamed recently. It was UMFS. There were issues with that name. So sometimes there are issues with a name. I mentioned Mercy Corps will be rebranding with an amazing new name in March. Why do they have a new name? Well, if you're a global organization and you have a name that feels a little too religious with Mercy and a little too militaristic with Corps, it can be trouble for them to actually have their people be safe in other countries where they're helping them. But it's also kind of a weird name. If you're in France and you see Mercy Corps, that means thank you, dead body. So so yes, we're changing the name, but we've also, the real question is what the client calls for. And one of the things I always ask a client is, if they say, Kelly, can you help us be a stronger brand? I always say, will you let us help you be a better company? Because if you let us help you be a better company, I can promise you we will make you a stronger brand. And so a lot of the work is, how can this company be better at doing what it does well that's beneficial? How can it make sure its people are committed to that mission? Because they actually, there's something about an employee when they are reminded that the work they do positively impacts other people's lives, they're more excited and engaged when they come to work in the morning and you start to see positive impacts. And now I promise to get to our other microphone.
Is it Matt?
Quickly, in a nutshell, because I know everyone wants to get to that T. What do you think of the influence of corporate social responsibility, and where does it fit in the earlier chart?
Corporate social responsibility, to me, I'll be interested to hear what you think about this too. We've talked about this.
It's a good question.
Is an example, it's a great question. It's an example of company priorities and action. It's an example of behavior. Every company is free to make whatever decision it wants to make about the behavior that it thinks is important to its mission, whatever its mission is. Organization, nonprofit, company, whatever it is. If they believe corporate social responsibility is an important component of those behaviors, and they integrate that initiative into their broader brand in the right way, in a way that aligns with everything else they're doing, more power to them. That's great. There are companies in the world who have defined their entire brand around that. Think about Patagonia, right? They did it. It was important to them. It used to be simplistic, I think, 10 years, 15 years ago when we talked about CSR, we would talk about, well, what are you doing for CSR? You got to do something. You actually don't. I think there are plenty of companies who decide, you know what, I'm not going to invest a lot of time and effort into that because it's not important to me. Okay, fine. As opposed to Patagonia, who said, it's so important to me, I'm going to sign my entire company up for it and donate all my future profits, right? Good, make that decision. As a brand decision, it's going to come down to what's important to your company as the values that you stand for and the promises you make to the world, including your own employees. If those are important to you, you should integrate them into your overall brand efforts to whatever extent they're important. I don't think it's as simple as saying, if you want to have a strong brand, you have to have a CSR program. I think it is as simple as saying, if you have a strong brand, you have a clear understanding of what your values and your priorities are. And if you have a CSR priority and a value there, integrate it into your brand in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think CSR is great if it aligns with who you are and what you want to accomplish as an organization. If it's a put-on, like, you know, just trying to greenwash the public or
Yeah.
then it's not going to be successful.
You know, that simplistic approach I talked about is what leads to that.
That's right.
It leads companies who really don't have any interest in that to do some greenwashing stuff and hope nobody's noticing the damage I'm doing over here. Right? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
And it sort of leads to a very positive thing about the lack of trust. Because if we live in a world now where, due to the wonders of the internet and social media, it's a matter of minutes before we know that maybe a corporate CEO has been misbehaving with respect to others in his organization. I can think of a video of a of a concert for. But if we live in a world where people are going to find out that Volkswagen cooked the emission standards, that people are going to find out that Wells Fargo cheated their customers, that people are going to find out if a CEO has been inappropriate with the people that work for him, if people are going to find out if Fruit Roll-Ups doesn't actually have fruit in it. That's
Wait,
true.
what?
They got sued, that's true. They paid $40 million because there's no fruit in Fruit Roll-Ups. Although I have to say, if you thought there was fruit, if you thought that was the way to get your fruit into your diet, gonna have another one of those roll-ups and I'll be healthy in no time. It's a little bit on you. But if we live in a world that is transparent, whether corporations like it or not, I have CEOs say, I want to be transparent. You don't have a choice. We're living in a transparent world. Everyone who walks into your front door has a video camera. It used to be when 60 Minutes walked in with Mike Wallace and a video camera, you were in trouble. Every employee has a video camera. So if we live in a world where that information is going to be transmitted quickly, then I can't imagine any outcome long term other than that we're going to actually have to start behaving better. We're going to actually have to start telling the truth more. And we're going to actually have to start holding our leaders accountable for better behavior. Daphne.
How do you rebrand the value of truth?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I'm glad it's time for our
That's right. Thank you all very much.